Hello, and welcome back to the Building with Brevin podcast. We've got my dad once again. Welcome back, Dad. Happy to have you back as always, and I know the listeners ours as well. Always good episodes with you on. But this episode is going to be a great one. We're actually starting a new series, and it's going to be a 7-week long series on our most popular episode that we've had thus far in the podcast. So that was actually back to episode 22. If people want to go back and re-listen to that or listen to it for the first time around, that was back in March of 2024. And we talked about the 7-step process of building a custom home. And that one was real popular with all you guys, all you listeners. It broke down every single step of the construction of a home. So it was not covering the pre-construction stuff, but picked up after basically you get your permits and the approval to start breaking ground on your lot. So that's where we're going to start today, actually. And we're going to jump into that first step in each of these next 7 episodes that we're going to do in this mini series is going to be one of the individual steps from that episode. So we can kind of dive deeper, get into the details of custom home building. So Dad, today I think we've come up with maybe a cool idea, and hopefully we can execute this well, but I'll play the part of the builder and kind of talk through what we're looking for on each step and what actually is involved in each step of this process. And then maybe you can kind of chime in as what you'd look for as an experienced homeowner and home builder. Homeowner and home builder on your perspective of things, what homeowners should be looking for when they're working with their builder at each of these phases. So definitely a lot to unpack, but that's why we're breaking this down into 7 mini episodes or a series along the way. So I think before we get started, I'll touch on the 7 steps, and then that way we're covering it all. But we'll start with that number 1, which is going to be the lot prep. So this is all falling under that phase 1 or first half of the build. As soon as you get that approval from your jurisdiction or your builder and you're ready to start actually breaking ground, the lot prep is the first thing. That's going to be lot clearing, and that's going to be any excavation, all that other stuff. So we'll talk about that today. The second step is going to be foundation. Third step is going to be frame, cornice, and decking of your home. And then number 4 is going to be mechanicals. Number 5 is going to be starting phase 2 or the second half of the build, which is sheetrock. And then step 6 is going to be your trim phase. And then step 7, which is the final phase, is final or punch work. And then, of course, handing over the keys and closing and moving into your new home. So that's the general layout, but enough talking from me. Dad, what's new with you?
Good to be here, Steven. I appreciate the invitation and the chance to be back. I like the 7 steps, and homeowners have a lot of questions, especially once they get through architecture. And of course, they've already purchased a lot and have designed a home for this lot that's their dream home and dream location, hopefully. And they want to know what's next. How do we get started? And you have this beautiful piece of property, hopefully, and what do you do with it? What's the first step in getting this house positioned and placed and set on this property that we purchased? So I know you have a lot of insights about that and have set many homes, and there's a lot of questions from homeowners that have never done this before. So hopefully we can kind of navigate through all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of our listeners are nationwide. So I will preface this with my experience comes more from Texas. And if most people know, in Texas, we don't do a lot of basements or different types of foundations than some other parts of the country. But luckily, that's why my dad, Mike, is here, and he's got some experience of building homes in Ohio, so up north, and has experience kind of all over the country, but more so Texas as well. But we'll start with that.
And adding to that, Stephen, sorry to interrupt, is a lot of what, there's a lot of things that apply to sandy soil in Florida and California, to rocky soils in the mountains, to clay soils in Houston. And, there's what we talk about. There's still some just general things that apply to all areas. So hopefully there will be some overlap here that we can shed some light for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point that, even if you do live in one of those remote parts or even not remote parts, but at Florida or a coastal area or something like that, this episode will be relevant, and this whole series will still be absolutely relevant to you guys as well. We'll try to chime in on all those perspectives. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump into this first topic, which is going to be that lot prep. And the first thing I would say right away is you want to make sure that you are knowing exactly where your lot is kind of a silly thing, but it's true. You want to make sure you're going to start on the right lot. So a survey needs to be done at that point. Stakes need to be out, usually on the corners of or the property boundaries, and just making sure that, okay, we got the right lot. Now we can bring the equipment out or whatever we need to do, chainsaws, laborers, whatever it is, it's going to start that process of most likely clearing the lot or clearing the pad for the home build.
No, it sounds funny that know where your lot is, but you make a really good point, and I have seen this on more than one occasion where a builder will start to build a home on the wrong lot, because if you're one of the first ones in a subdivision, all there is land. Mm-hmm. Or if you're the first one out in the country and all there is land, the boundaries are not all that well defined until you get it surveyed and staked. So absolutely get your lot surveyed and staked so you know exactly the boundaries of your property, because I mean, truly, I've seen this more than once where a builder will start to, the guys that come to set the forms, they set them on the wrong lot because they think that's where it is. So probably some lack of management too there, but yeah, that doesn't go without saying. Make sure you're building on the right lot.
Yeah. So first and foremost, now that you've hopefully identified your correct lot, you have the boundaries marked out. A reputable surveyor should be able to make sure those boundaries are accurate, so you're not getting into any disputes or crossing over any boundaries or setback lines or anything like that. So that's first and foremost. The second thing that you're going to want to look for in this lot prep phase is most likely going to be clearing the lot. So if there are trees or it's a heavily treed lot, anything like that, you definitely want to make sure that at least your foundation pad or your foundation footprint is cleared. And typically here in Texas and where we're building, we want to try to get at least 10 feet outside of that home building pad cleared as well. So if there's trees that are on the lot line or right on that house line, we'll go ahead and take those as well, just so that you're not going to have anything interfering with your foundation or the construction of your home with tree canopies or anything like that. The next thing after you clear the lot, so getting trees out of the house pad, also making sure that you don't take out the wrong trees, because that's a big thing. So typically those surveys at the beginning will also mark your important trees or any trees that you specify for them to mark. That way you can plan around those, make sure that your house is sitting away from those if possible, or if the lot's too small, then you can kind of plan the house around them. But I want to be cognizant of those trees that you're trying to keep as well. Make sure that those don't accidentally get taken out.
And I'll jump in on here. Yeah. If you have the trees, if you have a big, beautiful oak tree that you're saving and it's out 10 feet outside the property, sometimes those oak trees have a 30-foot canopy that are going to go into the building area of the house. So it's a good time to trim the tree back also. So even if you're not removing it, if you let the framers, when they're framing the house, trim your tree, they're going to hack it up. So it might be a good idea to kind of visualize how tall your house is going to be, and if any of the canopy is going to be kind of spreading out into the house area. And you might want to get those trimmed in advance too by a professional, rather than just letting a framer take their circular saws and cut those branches off. So.
Yep. Fantastic point. And as a professional, that's a really good note that you do want to hire a professional to trim those trees back, especially here in Texas. It's just a small little anecdote, but we have oak trees and they also are prone to oak wilt in certain seasons. And so just like you said, Dad, having a framer hack away at the tree can expose it to diseases or problems. And I'm sure that's true with trees all over the country. So making sure that a true arborist or somebody that knows what they're doing is cutting those trees back and making sure that they're gonna withstand being trimmed back outside the house and building area. That's definitely worth noting. Okay, so yeah, getting through lot clearing. Now we've got the trees removed. The house pad is hopefully scraped with a skid steer, typically is what we're doing here. Or, different parts of the country, it may be more sandy or make more clay. ours is very rocky. So we want to make sure that we have a lot of cactuses, things like that, or cacti, all that stuff. Try to get it as smooth and cleared out underneath the house pad as possible. You want to try to remove as much organic vegetation underneath your house footprint as possible, because all that stuff over time, of course, if you're putting concrete on top of it, it'll die. When it dies, it decomposes, and then it leaves a hole or exposure underneath your foundation that was not planned for as part of your engineer's plan, most likely. So yeah, definitely want to make sure that you're getting that as smoothed out as possible. And there's a lot more that goes into that, but a good core sample or drilling to pull out a piece of your lot, or 3 pieces of your lot is typically what they do. It just depends. But underneath the house footprint, that's enough to send to a geotechnical engineer. They can review that and know what kind of soil you're setting your house on top of. And then they'll be able to direct the foundation engineer on what needs to be done properly with the lot prep underneath your house to make sure that that house sits properly and is not going to have foundation issues in the future. Everybody anywhere in the country should always be concerned about foundation issues. It's a big thing. It's literally the structure of your whole entire home that sits on the ground, and the ground is very unpredictable. It's nature, and we can never predict that. So one thing to definitely be aware of as well, make sure your builder is following the proper procedures there, has the right geotechnical information, and then is using a reputable foundation engineer to design your foundation for your particular lot. So that should all have already been covered pre-construction, but just making sure that they're following the plan at that point when you're done clearing.
And you never understate the importance of a core sample. I've seen this also because I'm old, but when you do a core sample, it's going to identify maybe voids or caves. If you're in a rocky area or a silty or a sandy loam or something, you drill a core and there's a hollow spot underneath your house, you need to find that out. And that does happen in certain areas of the country. Secondly, I've built in areas, I'll just use one example, downtown Houston, where they're demolishing some of the one-story bungalows and building new homes on those properties. Well, the demolition companies were demolishing the house and burying the house on that same lot. So if you don't know that stuff was buried, you're going to be building a house on top of a bunch of corroded, rotted wood, or whatever the house was that's demolished. You're going to be building a house on top of a demolished house. So make sure you know what's underneath that house.
Yeah, and as much as you may think you do, you don't. I can guarantee it. Yeah, you don't know who was next door, what happened, or what was underneath the neighborhood. And every lot's different too. You could be right next door to a lot that has solid rock, and somehow you've got granite or dirt or something
water.
Completely different. Water. Yeah, exactly.
Water. If you're building by a lake, you might go down 10 feet and hit water.
Exactly.
That's going to change the foundation design.
Yep. So I think that's all great to know. And now we've got a house pad hopefully scraped and prepared for your home. Now, one other thing to throw in here at this point, and Dad, you can talk more about the second part of this, but the first part for us here in Central Texas is more so going to be, we've got a ton of hills in our area. So working through, is there any excavation that's needed on the lot? Do we need to cut the lot, as we call it, or do a lot cut? That's usually one way to do it. Other places I've seen where they'll actually build up the foundation or build up the pad for the foundation. That can be all kinds of complexities as well. But either one of those, so we call it either excavation of taking land out or building land up, which all that, of course, affects what your house is sitting on and needs to be done in a very systematic manner. So we won't dive into the details there, but this is the time that would be done. Now that you have your house pad cleared, you know where your house is sitting on the lot, and okay, does the lot need to be cut? Does it not? Are we building it up? All that kind of stuff. This is typically that time that falls in. Now, I say the second part, that of basements, this is probably the time where excavation would happen for a basement, coming in with a big excavator or whatever and digging out that area for those basements. So you can maybe talk through that.
Well, yeah, sure. And a basement is just to get below the freeze line. So in certain parts of the country, there's a frost line, And if the frost line is 4 feet below the surface, you need to have your basement or your foundation below the frost line so your house isn't heaving and settling with the freeze and thaw cycle. So you have to be below that. If your frost line is 4 feet below the surface, you might want to go another 4 more feet, and instead of having a crawl space on the foundation, you might want to just go 4 more feet and put a full basement in. So at minimal cost at that point, because you're excavating 4 feet down, it might not be that much more to go 4 more feet and put in a basement. And a basement almost doubles the size of your house in some cases, especially if it's a one-story. So it's all about the frost line if you have to put a basement in, and then there's other things to consider with drainage and trying to keep the foundation or the water from coming through the foundation. But those are the details the builder will work out. That's not in this phase of construction.
Yeah, but that does bring us up to another great point, and I'm glad you said that because we're talking about water. So let's jump into that. Any home and any home builder, water should always be top of mind. Controlling the water outside the home as well as inside the home, all that stuff should be very well planned for. Basements, of course, just like you said, even regular foundations, sometimes if they've got drops or whatever else, you want to make sure that those are waterproofed properly, and you want to direct the water on your lot. So this is another good time during this lot prep phase where you're making sure that the builder and yourself as well are looking out for those drainage patterns. Do you have a drainage swale right through the middle of your lot? How are you guys handling that, right? Is it going to be cut in a different direction to direct that water a different way? I mean, water's going to follow the path it's going to follow most times. So it's tough to work with water, but you've got to plan for it. And then also making sure that if you've got water coming off of your lot, make sure you're not dumping that onto your neighbor's lot, and there's going to be some liabilities or some issues there as well. So there has to be a lot of thought put into watershed and where that rainwater is going to go, because we all know it happens, and we don't like to plan for 100-year flash flood, but sure enough, in our lifetime, we're probably going to see one, and it's probably going to be right after you move into your house. So make sure that you're planning for that, and make sure that the proper grading on your lot is what we call it. So make sure the grade is all sloping accordingly to handle that water on your particular lot. Maybe you can touch more on that, Dad, in basements.
I can't be overstressed. You're absolutely right. There's a few things that you can absolutely not change after the foundation is poured or the basement is dug. In my opinion, kind of the rule of building is you can only set a house too low. You really can't set it too high. And that really refers to what Steven's saying, and that's just the water. If you set the house too low and you have to drain water from the back of your property 200 feet to the curb, and you're too low, you have to have a 10% grade, which is about 1 inch and 10 feet on flat surface. If you don't have that, you're going to have ponding, and you're going to have to put in drains, which is going to cost a whole lot more money. So you have one opportunity, and that's at this stage of construction, to make sure the house is set at a proper height. In the flat areas, I'll just throw out a rule of thumb that if you're on like a typical residential lot, you want to be above the crown of the street, at least 18 inches above the crown of the street. That's kind of a rule of thumb for like more of a production setting, but farther back you go, that you have to account for that fall in the drainage. So the farther back you go, and if you're draining water from back to front, you have to make sure that you have the house set high enough so you can do that.
Yep.
And it will only cause problems if you don't. So that's a really big one, Steven.
I like that. And that brings up two other really good points, and one good segue into the next topic. But the first thing is, some people can use drainage and things like that, such as like French drains or whatever else, to try to manage that water and direct it. As a builder, I don't like drains as a first line or first resort. That's always usually a second or a third or last line of resort. If you can grade the lot properly and direct the water with the natural terrain of the lot, that's always going to be the best. And then drains if needed. But drains eventually over time will clog, or something will get in them, and then they require maintenance. And should never be your plan A. It can be a plan B, or it can be an assistance to your grading and your drainage plan, but it should never be your primary source of getting water somewhere, in my opinion.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned another really good point too, is talking about slopes on a lot, which, like you said, how high do you set your home? Can't go too high. Now, I will say when we're planning a home from the very beginning, and I would press all the listeners to do the same, make sure that you know what your builder is looking at and what you're going to be looking at for your driveway slope. That's another big thing on whenever you're planning a home. You can actually set the house too high in certain conditions. You're saying for water, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, from a driveway slope perspective, you want to be sure that you're meeting your local jurisdiction's regulations on driveway slope. So yeah, we've been working through a home right now. Our driveway slope is right on that line of being possibly too steep. And we've worked with the homeowner from the very beginning to set those expectations that, hey, you're going to have a steep driveway. Do you drive a truck or an SUV or both? And are you comfortable with pushing this upper limit of the allowable grade? So anyways, I bring that up just because it does happen more often than not in hilly areas, and sometimes you can't avoid it, but you have to make sure that it's going to be approved by your local jurisdictions and your homeowner's okay with it. Because yeah, sometimes you're going to get these ski slope driveways, as you say, Dad, and they're just not practical. So that's something to think through. And if you need to drop that down, then you can do a lot cut. If you need to build that up, you can, like we said, add fill material underneath your foundation to build it up, all that kind of stuff, so that you're setting your house at the proper height. One thing to note, I mean, we'll talk kind of general numbers, but 12% grade is typically what residential construction or residential code is saying for driveway slopes. So just a number to kind of keep in mind loosely.
You mean maximum slope?
I'm sorry, maximum. Yeah, maximum slope of 12% grade. That's a loose number to keep in mind. Certain jurisdictions may have tighter restrictions, such as 8% grade or 10% grade. So it really just depends, but make sure you're thinking through that if you think your driveway slope is going to be pretty steep. And also, what are you comfortable with? If you don't like driving on a steep hill and you get icy weather and you're never going to be able to leave your home because the driveway is too steep, then definitely something to think through as well.
And the consequences of the steepness of the driveway isn't as much of an issue as getting off the driveway onto a flat surface. The angle of coming down the driveway and then going onto a flat surface, the bumpers are going to hit the driveway or the street. So that's the issue. It's not so much the slope, is just transitioning from the driveway to the street where you're going to probably scrape. So that's the thing to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Especially with lower cars and, if kids are around and riding bikes and stuff. I mean, sometimes a steep driveway could be fun, but it also can be a hazard as well. Yeah, so utilities is a great thing to bring up, and also the layout of your lot. So knowing where your utilities are going to go beforehand and knowing where those things need to be run. So for instance, if you have to have a septic field in the back of your home and your lot's very narrow, that needs to be planned beforehand. So knowing that, does anything need to be dug in at this excavation or lot prep stage in the very beginning to prep for that? Are you on a skinny, narrow lakefront lot and you want to do a boat dock? Well, that should probably be done first. So excavating for that boat dock and making sure that you're digging that out at this time would be a great time to do that, because getting heavy equipment through the side setbacks of your home after the home and the foundation have already been poured could be impossible and not an option. So thinking through that and making sure things are going in the proper order. If you have to build back to front on the lot, sometimes as we call it, making sure you're aware of that. And then that kind of leads us into setbacks, which every neighborhood, every jurisdiction, every HOA, every city and community and all that stuff have different setback requirements for your lot. So just because your surveyor says that there's a standard 5 or 10 foot right of way at the front of your property, for instance, that may not be the same for your local jurisdiction. They might require a 20 or 25 foot setback for the front
Steve,
face
can you
of your
explain
home.
what a setback is?
That's a good point. Yeah. So setback is going to be from your property line to the nearest point of your home, if that makes sense. So like for the front face of your home, say there's a 25 foot setback, that would have to be 25 feet off of your property line. That's not necessarily always the same as the front street, if that's how your home is set up. So sometimes your property line is set back off of the street for a 5-10 foot right of way for the city. If they ever have to dig utilities or expand the street or something like that, there's different right of ways before your lot will typically start. So like we said, very important to know those boundaries of your lot so that you can hit the proper setbacks on your lot for where your home can actually start. Did that cover it?
Yeah, I think that was good. Well explained.
Okay, good. Yeah, good point though. Just to explain setbacks. So what else do they need to know there as far as easements, maybe utility easements, utilities, setbacks? I think those all kind of fall under the same umbrella.
Right. Just areas where you cannot build. So it really shrinks the size of your lot. If you're on an infill lot, or like you said, a lake lot, a narrow lot, it really, or a corner lot would have a side setback and a front setback. So you're kind of pinched into a corner on a corner lot. So yeah, that's something to consider probably before you buy the lot. But once you have the lot, you're kind of squeezed into an area where you can only build, off, so close to the side yard and so close to the front. And some have rear setbacks too. You can't be too close to the back either.
Mm-hmm. And knowing what cannot fall within those setbacks is another good point. That say you want to build a pool, sometimes those pools cannot be in the rear setback as well. So you got to make sure that from the very beginning, like we said, this is all stuff that the architect and your builder should be doing in the pre-construction phase, but knowing what can go and what cannot go in setbacks. AC pads, driveways, can those go in setbacks? Sometimes they can, sometimes they cannot. So really making sure that you're checking that stuff with those local governing bodies. The other thing to make this more universal for our listeners, even if you're saying, hey, I've got a 10-acre lot and I have plenty of space to build on, I'm not too worried about setbacks or utility easements or things like that because I'm just going to build right in the middle of my 10 acres. Well, make sure that you're aware of your utilities because there are certain times where there's utility easements that run right through the middle of a lot. So you might think you're safe or you might think you're building outside of certain easements, but make sure that you're checking that with a good surveyor and also with the plat map from the city or the local county or whatever else, because they have all that data that you need to double check and triple check to make sure that you're not building your house right on top of a utility easement that would eventually be in the path. And technically, as a right of way, they have the right to tear down whatever's in their path. So your home would unfortunately be in the path. And so anyways, something to keep in mind. But Dad, anything left unsaid on this episode to kind of tie the knot?
We've hit the highlights. Certainly all very important things when you set a home. And just kind of, if I were to mention the two most important things, it would be to consider driveway slope and drainage when you set the house. And of course, if you're in a area where the freeze is a problem, you have to get down below the frost line, but the builders know that. But what's going to end up is, the drainage, you want to make sure you don't have a problem with that later. And that becomes at the house set. So the driveway slope is the other one. You don't want something too steep. Most people don't want something too steep. And then if you have a front door that's even higher than where the garage goes in, you have steps. I mean, you don't want something that has, stairway to heaven to get up to your front door either. So that all comes into play when you set the house.
Yep. Yeah. Really good points. Yeah, I think this is really good. So listening to this episode, hopefully this gives listeners more confidence going into that first step of the building process, what to look for, what the layout should be and all that kind of stuff. And by the end of this lot prep phase, the house or the foundation pad should be all ready to go so that the next step, like we'll talk about on the next series or next episode of the series, is where the foundation crew starts to come. So they're going to start setting their footings for the foundation or setting their form boards for the foundation and really starting that process of placing the house footprint. So that'll all come next. But like we said, by the end of this lot prep phase, that should be complete and ready for the foundation crew to come in and start that process, or utilities to come in and start their process if you're doing utilities or anything else before your build. So like we said, hopefully this is a good first step and gets people aware of what's involved. But Dad, as always, thank you so much. This has been a great episode. We want to encourage you listeners, if you can, and if you found value in this episode or any of our episodes, please feel free to leave us a review or a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Really helps us grow our reputability and spread the word about building with Brevin. So not only that, if you enjoy it, share it with a friend. That always helps as well. But you guys know what to do. And if you found value, thank you so much. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, Steven.